Dr. Matt from nzdsos.com, and I'm here with my friend Greg Rzesniowiecki, who is our resident know-all really on all things WHO, IHR. Well, he's certainly earned his stripes in learning the ins and outs of what's been going on and what we potentially are going to be committed to and what the implications of that might be. So I'd like to just first of all thank you for your hard work and dedication for several years now. You've got petitions into Parliament. You've asked them some hard questions, and you've put a lot of very strong and incontrovertible facts in front of them. What do you make of where we're at the moment?
We're in quite a hiatus between what the last government was doing in terms of oppressing the people and what the new government may have in mind. And we've really got to think deeply, given that this has been something that's been perpetrated across the world, particularly the Western governments and the Anglosphere, to what extent the new government feels as though that they can actually move away from the agenda that's been in place over the COVID years, or the COVID era, ERROR. I found the coalition agreements more than I thought we were going to get in terms of the coalition agreement, so that was quite positive. And so I'm optimistic, and that's generally my nature, but the time is going to tell. We were struggling, or we were running into being locked into the international health regulation amendments, which are going to shorten the period of time that a government can accept or reject future amendments. And the coalition agreement did have a specific clause in there saying that they would reserve a position in relationship to that. There was a number of us, including, a number of us that were informed the government that maybe reserving a position may be difficult in respect to amendments just because of how the international health regulations were set up, and that rejection was the more legal or lawful or legitimate way to deal with it. There's a number of people that wrote letters to the government in the lead up to the end of November, when the deadline was looming to provide that rejection or reservation. And we understand that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade informed WHO that they were rejecting or reserving a position, but we haven't seen the actual letter or have absolute confirmation as to what's actually occurred. But we know that some documentation's gone, so we understand in principle we're not going to be covered by the shortening of the time frame. So that's one good thing. In respect to the 307 amendments that are being negotiated by the working group, they were to be finalised by this month, or at latest by mid-January 2024, so that, as per the WHO constitution, all the governments would be given 4 months' notice of whatever the amendments were before a World Health Assembly, which is due to be in May 2024. But now we're advised that they are unlikely to have a package of amendments ready, and so the working group's intending to work right up to the World Health Assembly, right, in developing those amendments. And so I guess there is a legal argument to say that anything that they put forward after January of 2024 cannot be legitimately considered at the World Health Assembly because the governments haven't been given 4 months' notice. Okay, so there's business as usual going on in the background, but we hope that it all is able to come to a grinding halt. But the World Health Organization have organised a legal opinion that says it's okay for that process to go on. I bet they have. Despite the fact that it's set out in the Constitution that they've got to give the governments 4 months' notice. There is also resistance from other governments. It's like keep watching this space and keep being active in expressing one's opposition or our opposition to what's going on, because basically they didn't follow their last international health regulation guidelines in respect to a pandemic, and nor did New Zealand follow their 2017 pandemic plan, right?
So it all
got thrown out of the window, and we're doing this, right? One has to be optimistic, because the new government has clearly indicated that they're going to do things different to the last government. But there is this awfully strong power that operates in the world, which, who knows what's going to win out in the day, but we've got to keep fighting.
Yeah, our certain experience of looking at, trying to get some clarification on what international law says is that it's way worse in trying to understand our own laws, in that there's many different opinions and interpretations of all sorts of things. But can I just come back to what's going on in New Zealand and ask you what you make of this phrase, this curious phrase of a national interest test? Because it seems to me that could cover a multitude of sins, and that's open to all sorts of interpretations. Do you think this is just a sort of a get-out-of-jail clause that the coalition is hoping is going to allow them to actually say, well, we think it's in our interest, of course it is, to be part of the WHO, or is it going to be something that's going to have some teeth and be relatively impervious to international law that might come along and say, well, actually this is not anything we had to take any notice of, and we're going to plough on regardless?
Okay, so national interest is like a common use term, and it's often used in government circles. So what's in the national interest? And along 2014, I OIA'd the GCSB and the NZSIS a list of 35 questions. And one of them was, what is the national interest that they're working to? So they use the terms like working towards New Zealand security, but also it being a free and democratic nation, right? So we have to ensure that the definition or the meaning of free and democratic is what everyone understands it to be, right?
Well, it ought to be.
Yeah, so what comes with freedom and democracy is certain things like rule of law, one vote, one value.
Checks and balances.
Functional
institutions.
So you've got you got the parliament, the executive and the judiciary. You've got civil society acting and all the rest of it. Well, the last government shut down civil society and anything that was anyone who was raising any opposition or any real, genuine information that was contrary to their narrative. So they weren't acting as in light of a free and democratic nation.
Well, we've lost count of the number of institutions that we've failed to get any engagement with, and upholding their charters.
There isn't one New Zealand institution that wasn't screwed by COVID mania. Right? I can't think of one. There's the judiciary, the universities, the government itself, the police, the military, every institution, the press. I mean, the press isn't worth toilet paper, in terms of the value.
The most crucial one from my point of view, and that's the health system too.
All of the medical boards, the medical councils, the nursing council, midwifery council, psychiatry council, the whole thing. But the other thing is on national interest. They're already obliged, right, to provide a national interest analysis of any binding treaty action before they take binding treaty action in respect to any international agreements.
And yet that's been
multilateral agreements.
That's been done behind closed doors, obviously, for years and years, because new politicians come in and they often say they're shocked at actually how many agreements we've been signed up to that nobody's heard of. And I think this discussion around national interest could lead nicely into a talk about, well, actually, let's see what the interest of the nation is by doing some referendums.
I was proposing my most recent petition two petitions to the Parliament were proposing amendments before New Zealand signs on to the international health regulations, and the pandemic treaty. And now that went to the petitions committee and they came back and said no, they felt as though like it was being handled okay as it was. So like they just like kicked that to touch.
Well, that's all right then. Yeah.
Well, I don't take anything they say like that. I mean, but yes, it's definitely we're in like this sort of interesting liminal space. It is interesting also that the proposals about in the ACT National Agreement for a broadened terms of reference for the COVID inquiry, subject to public consultation, that hasn't made it into the 100-day plan. And also the New Zealand First National Agreement, which set out like for an independent public inquiry to be done like with urgency, right? Both in terms of its implementation and its I've forgotten the exact word, but like its implementation or like its conduct. That also, and they gave 4 specific references about what they wanted to look at, including vaccine efficacy, right? That didn't make it into the 100-day plan either.
Yeah, and I have to say that under your leadership, and actually with most of your work with an input from a few of us in the broader community, you've provided a very comprehensive and reasonable and rational terms of reference that ought to save a fair bit of time for them in there if they just really had a look at that and took advantage of the work that you've done. Are you optimistic, just to wind up, do you think we'll get a decent public-facing inquiry that will have the courage to look at all aspects, particularly the ones that we've been banging on about so much?
Well, from my point of view, again, I have to stay optimistic, and because they're saying that that's what they're going to do. But I guess for everyone, it's like watch this space. Really, I like to see what does happen. But stay very active in it, and like it's no good sitting passively and just watching with popcorn. It's like we have to actually do things to put pressure on the politicians and remind them what they promised, and make sure that this all comes to pass. And we've been doing that. Like we've pointed out to them. Like from the local BFF in Otaki, we wrote another letter to them just recently pointing out what they promised in their agreements and what's going to happen with the inquiries. And we haven't got a response back. There's been acknowledgements that they got the letters or the correspondence.
Well, that's important in its own right.
So, it's gone through, but we haven't had any formal responses or considered responses to what we've been putting to them. But okay. I know they've been busy, like winding back a number of pieces of legislation that the Labor Party put in place in the last government. But these things are critical for us. Yeah. And it's also like, how can New Zealand make a judgment, like the New Zealand government make a judgment going forward about how we do with future bioweapon pandemics?
You can say that. I couldn't possibly comment.
It's like, how can we deal with these future releases, however they come from, right, if we haven't actually studied and understood what we did right, not much, and what we did wrong with the COVID pandemic.
All right. Hey, look, Greg, you're one of the, I think, unsung heroes, certainly for your work rate and your commitment. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
Cheers.